Sprite stands barefoot on the Rampart Citadel balustrade as dawnlight warms her folded wings. Sprite unfurls her wings as sunrise strikes them, sending light shards across the marble floor. Sprite descends the moss-covered spiral staircase deeper into the Rampart Citadel. Sprite walks the eastern corridor, trailing phosphorescent streaks along the mossy wall. Sprite pauses at the window, tracing the flight path of the silver pegasi outside. Sprite walks the corridor as the crystal lanterns extinguish in a rolling wave before her. Sprite leans on the balcony railing as her wings catch the full morning sunlight. Sprite extends her hand toward the larger unicorn as sunlight catches its golden horn. Sprite presses her forehead to the unicorn's horn, creating a soft amber glow between them. Sprite pulls back from the unicorn's horn, drawn by a pulsing orange glow from the forge below. Sprite descends into the underground forge passage as the dwarven runes pulse brighter around her. Sprite enters the underground forge chamber and watches the dwarven blacksmith at the anvil. Sprite watches intently as the dwarven blacksmith shapes the silver maple leaf pendant on the anvil. The dwarven blacksmith quenches the silver maple leaf pendant as Sprite watches closely. Sprite receives the silver maple leaf pendant from the dwarven blacksmith as it settles against her collarbone. Sprite ascends from the forge as morning light restores the natural iridescence to her wings. Sprite welcomes the cluster of pixies as they approach, with wildflower stems in the courtyard. Sprite receives the crimson and violet flower wristlets woven by the pixies on her. Sprite admires her new flower wristlets and climbs toward the observation terrace, followed by pixies. Sprite steps onto the observation terrace and gazes over the Tularian forest with the silver maple leaf pendant at her throat. Sprite tracks the gold dragon's arc, while a pixie on her shoulder points excitedly toward it. Sprite walks the observation terrace, trailing pollen from her flower wristlets across the carved stone figures. Sprite grips the western balustrade as a violet cloud wisp casts the first shadow across the contested land's view. Sprite descends the rose-covered passage into the inner garden maze as midday light freckles her wings. Sprite enters the inner garden maze and brushes lavender tops as crimson roses arch overhead. Sprite reaches the maze center as the dendroid guard slowly splits its bark, revealing indigo berries. Sprite cups her hands as the dendroid guard releases indigo berries into her palms. Sprite retraces her path through the maze, cradling indigo berries, as turquoise flashes draw her toward the exit. Sprite extends her hand of indigo berries at the lily pond edge as the dragonfly swarm pivots to face her. Sprite glides across the lily pads, through a living tunnel of dragonflies, still holding the indigo berries. Sprite enters the Rampart inner rose garden, followed by the dragonfly swarm, with two settling on her shoulders. Sprite walks the rose corridor, pausing as the warmed indigo berries glow faintly in the filtered light. Sprite steps through the waterfall curtain into the warm hollow, where a fairy dragon rests behind the cascade.
Sprite offers indigo berries to the fairy dragon, which accepts one with a pleased gold flash.
Sprite emerges from the waterfall with remaining indigo berries and walks back through the rose corridor. Sprite exits the rose garden and approaches two royal griffons perched on the upper rampart.
Sprite offers an indigo berry to the royal griffon, which accepts it with visible satisfaction.
Sprite runs through the rain to shelter under the dendroid guard, wrapping her wings like a cloak. Sprite shelters under the dendroid guard as its warmth pulses through her, while rain splashes on her extended foot. Sprite unfolds her rain-beaded wings and steps from the dendroid guard's shelter into the steaming post-rain garden. Sprite follows the green dragon's ascent with a silver flash from her pendant and walks eastward through the dripping maze. Sprite sits on the eastern wall overlooking the rain-washed Tularian forest as her wings dry in the sunset. Sprite smiles as the starling murmuration briefly forms a winged shape, then peels off her wilted flower bracelets. Sprite walks back through the garden as the violet cloud bank over the contested lands grows visibly closer. Sprite walks the corridors as sunset red meets blue lantern light, splitting her pendant between fire and ice. Sprite launches from the western tower and joins the gold dragon in synchronized sunset flight. Sprite flies level with the gold dragon's eye, sharing the last red sunset light as the sky turns magenta. Sprite touches the unlit crystal torch, then watches an orange light descend rapidly from the southern sky. Sprite approaches the settled phoenix and draws a thread of golden light from its tail feather. Sprite lights every crystal torch along the colonnade until the entire corridor blazes with golden light. Sprite steps onto the eastern terrace and gazes at the emerging Milky Way as her shadow stretches across the stone.
Sprite launches to meet the returning silver Pegasi and weaves a silver ribbon into the lead mare's mane.
Sprite lands at the plaza's mosaic compass rose as the northern aurora casts a faint emerald glow across the marble. Sprite spirals upward around the tower as pixies join her path against the vivid emerald aurora. Sprite orbits the tower with the pixie swarm as the aurora fills the sky with green and violet curtains. Sprite raises her arms, and the pixie swarm forms a living pillar of light, reaching toward the pulsing aurora. Sprite lands on the observation terrace as the mosaic map glows emerald, and her pendant swirls with pixie trails. Sprite stands on the balustrade, wings spread wide as living aurora screens against the pulsing northern sky. Sprite stands bathed in shifting aurora colors as a pixie forms a gold-green halo above her head. Sprite descends the tower stairs with a pixie on her shoulder, moving from aurora green to phoenix amber light.
Sprite walks the golden corridor toward her private quarters with the pixie on her shoulder. Sprite enters her private chamber and places her palm on the stained glass maple leaf as aurora light fills the room.
Sprite removes the silver maple leaf pendant and places it beside the resting pixie on the bedside shelf.
Sprite wraps her wings like a cocoon and lies back as the last aurora trace fades beyond the stained glass.